What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is. Your boy Spruce back in the cut, shorty. Ain't gonna lie, we up late. Get into some reactions. Niggas is bored in this bitch, fighting off demons. I'm fighting them off. Um, I gotta get my hair right on my face. But yeah, today we're gonna be reacting to Joe Bartolozzi, one of my favorite YouTubers, man. This dude is a clown, bro. He's a fucking clown. The most brutal punishments in human history. We got about 3 reactions we're gonna be doing of his. So we're gonna be tagging him in all them videos. Like, comment, subscribe if you mess with his content. And we just gonna check it out. Let's get to it, sir.
Punishments in human history.
Let's start with the bad and slowly work our way towards the stuff of nightmares. Number 10, the Rat Dungeon. If you were alive in London, England during the medieval period, you would have definitely heard about the Rat Dungeon, since this punishment struck paralyzing fear into the hearts of even the most hardened criminals. This was a cell that was located at the bottom of the London Tower, where prisoners were shackled and chained in complete darkness. But here's the thing, the dungeon was connected to the nearby river and just below the river's waterline, so that when the water levels rose, all the rats that lived along the riverbed would be pushed out of their shelters and forced to swim downstream. This would of course lead the hungry and angry rats towards the entrance of the dungeon, where they would then come face to face with the prisoner. But to the unlucky prisoner, he never actually saw anything, and all he would hear were
Oh my god, you would just hear them. You can't move. You're shackled to a wall and you hear. Oh my god, and they start eating you.
soft scurries of the rat's feet entering the dungeon.
This is the first one.
And in a matter of minutes, these soft noises were in the hundreds and all around.
Oh, I'm killing all of those mother. I ain't letting no rats eat me alive. Unless they chained my hands and my feet. But I'd be stomping on them mother. They got near me, I'd be making noises. I'd scare the out of them.
Him. These angry and aggressive rats would then begin to take small bites from the prisoner, who had no way of defending.
Yo, that must hurt so bad. Because that's just a slow death. Rats eating you alive would probably take hours. Or days. Like them just nibbling on you.
Himself. Now he might be able to shake the rats off for a few hours, but eventually the prisoner would pass out from pure exhaustion. And while he slept, the rats would continue to take bites from his flesh. Eventually, when he would wake up, he would discover hundreds of bites throughout his entire body. But it didn't stop there. The prisoner was left here for days or weeks on end, depending on his crime. But towards the end of the medieval period, this form of punishment just got more and more deranged, eventually becoming a form of execution, where prisoners would just be thrown in the dungeon and forgotten about. Number 9. The Rack. This was yet another
Yeah, I heard of the rack. Yo, I mentioned that on stream the other day, and y'all ain't know what the fuck I was talking about. Where they stretch your body out and then you fucking die.
Punishment that took place in the London Tower. The rack was a torture device that was used in many places throughout history. This form of punishment was originally designed for getting a confession, usually from criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war. The device looked like a large ladder, but instead of secure steps, they would actually rotate like a rolling pin. You see, when a prisoner was placed on the rack, he would have his feet and wrists tied to a ratchet pulley system, where 2 legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes and locking them in place, placing an increasing amount of strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows with
And your arms would dislocate.
every single turn. This was all done to get information, but of course, a lot of the times the truth was not accepted as reality, and the
Bro, you know what's nuts though? Like, people talk about this shit like, oh wow, that's so nuts. Like, imagine this actually happened to people. Like, they actually, like, somebody died by getting eaten alive by rats. A conscious human got eaten alive by rats.
say whatever he believed the officials wanted to hear.
Dude, the second they brought out the rack, I'd tell them what they want to hear. I wouldn't even let myself get on that bitch. The second they fucking bring out that ladder thing, I'd be like, yep, here it is. I'm about to lay this all out for you. Do you or somebody you love like Joe Bartolozzi's content and want to rep some of his merch?
Nah, this nigga is stupid, bro. On God though, if they bring that hoe out, I'm snitching, bro. Like I'm not getting stretched to oblivion. That's first of all, that's pause.
That old saying, home is where the heart is? That's true in this home. We've been here for years.
Prisoners were usually released with dislocated joints, but oftentimes they were left completely paralyzed. That was the case in England in 1447 when a 25-year-old girl named Anne Askew would be tortured on the rack for hours and hours on end and left completely paralyzed after all her joints were dislocated.
Wow.
She was then carried on a chair and burned alive at the stake. All
They didn't
And imagine being
they didn't play with you bitches back in the day. They was not playing with y'all. That's how you know y'all evil.
awake that whole time.
by scriptures from the Bible, which she preached in private to a small group of women, which were the exact women she refused to name and expose during her torture. You see, during this time period, if you followed any religion other than the Catholic Church, you better not say a word to anybody, including your own husband, which was the person that turned her in.
Oh, fuck. Yo, you a bitch. Your fucking wife in the 1500s says, hey, I'm practicing fucking whatever denomination of Christianity that isn't Catholicism at that time. And he goes, yes, priest, that's my wife. She's committing
The ultimate people pleaser.
disloyalty towards the church.
I'm not giving up my pussy. My only form of pussy. For that.
Number 8. Keel hauling. This brutal
Oh
punishment
yeah, no, this is worse. Okay, yeah, no, it's getting worse. Yeah, he made this list pretty good. I've heard of keel hauling.
was carried out at sea on sailors who would steal or be violent towards others and would usually result in death. Keel hauling would start with a sailor having his arms tied with a rope, then loop around the entire circumference of the ship before being tied off to his feet. The sailor would then be thrown overboard while the group of men on board pulled on the rope to slowly drag him around the outside of the ship, including over the keel, which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the time,
Dude, I think one drag over, you're getting murdered. If they throw you over one side and they forcefully drag you along this, when you reach this tip, you're probably snapping your fucking spine. You're probably drowning before you get back up.
or the keel, which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the times, the sailor wouldn't even have to worry about it, since they were dead before they ever reached it. Kinda just depends on how hard the guys on the rope feel like working that day. Not only would the sailors be drowning and getting their backs and necks broken on the keel, they were also getting sliced apart like a cheese grater by all the sharp barnacles on the
Oh!
outside of the ship. But if by some miracle a sailor actually happens to make it all the way around the ship without dying,
Don't tell me they do it again.
one of three things will happen. 1. He would be sent for round 2 and for sure be dead by then. 2. Be freed and allowed back on the ship, where he would then slowly die to infections. Or 3. Live the rest of his life single and being made fun of since he was now fully covered in scars from head to toe. Number 7. Crushed by elephants. Now we are
Oh! They did that?
How was that not
They would
number
fucking
1?
just get an elephant to walk over your skull?
getting to the part of the list where living is no longer an option. This form of punishment has been used by many countries throughout history, but was
Oh my
most
god, like a melon. Imagine, dude, an elephant steps on your fucking head. It'd probably make the same sound as a watermelon.
recently used by India in the 19th century, which is really not that long ago if you really think about it. Like, your great-grandma could have witnessed one of
Yeah,
these.
your great-great-great-great-grandmother could have been killed by an elephanting.
What type of crimes would you have to commit to be crushed by an elephant, you might ask? Well, apparently if you failed to pay your taxes, that was
Oh, yeah, that, yeah, you don't pay your taxes. Hey, today we got the IRS. Back then, they had the elephant.
or being an enemy soldier was also a great way to become a tortilla. But the most disturbing case in history was when the 4th Mughal Emperor of India ordered an enormous amount of criminals to be crushed to death in a single day, simply because he was bored and needed some entertainment. The guy who forgot to pay his taxes, crushed.
Yo,
The
you
men
gotta remember, that's how bored motherfuckers were. to go witness like a hanging. Like they would just do that. That was like the Friday activity in like the medieval times.
Man who stole an apple from the local market, crushed. The little orphan who jaywalked across the street, crushed. The man who murdered his neighbor and added his remains to a large pot of tomato soup, then fed that soup to his family and watched them eat it from the shadows with a creepy smirk on his face. He's alright. Apparently he makes a damn good soup. There are a few ways that this public execution goes down, but one thing always stays the same. There's always a guy on top of the elephant controlling its every move. And this was very intentional, as this was meant to showcase just how amazing the ruling class were. I mean, look at them. They can control an elephant. Now be impressed. The first method of execution was the one that you better pray for if this was going to be your fate. Here, the criminals would have their arms tied behind their back and their heads placed on a pedestal.
I'd pray it step on my fucking skull. Like, if it doesn't step on your skull, that's gonna fucking hurt.
Where it was then crushed like a grape by the elephant's foot.
That's better, see?
Now, the second method is much more cruel. The criminal would be placed flat on the floor with their arms tied behind their backs. Then the elephants would be guided to walk over the person's body, and hopefully the criminal would die on the first go. But sometimes they just end up crushing a leg or an arm, so the elephant then has to make a U-turn and try again and again and again. The final and worst way is when a highly trained elephant was guided to slowly crush the person limb by limb. They would first crush the arms, then the legs, and then poke holes in them with the tusk, until eventually dealing the final blow to the head or torso. This is the more theatrical route that rulers like the Fourth Mughal love to take, and made for a truly traumatizing experience for everyone, except for the Fourth Mughal.
But why they would watch it? They would watch it. People would go and watch it. They're not forced to stay there.
He loved it. Number 6, impalement. Probably.
Oh yeah, oh my god. Oh my god, they keep getting worse. They keep getting worse. They keep getting worse.
One of the grossest and most cruel
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know how it could get worse than the elephant. Impalement is crazy.
forms of punishment on the list. This has been used by a few countries throughout history, but was most recently used in Egypt in the 17th century, usually against criminals that were highway robbers, grave thieves, or anyone who would try and start a rebellion. This punishment would start by having a criminal lay flat on their stomachs with their arms tied behind their back. They would then be sliced open with a razor to increase the size of their back door. And
Oh my god, that alone, they're making your ass a bigger hole so they can fit a fucking wooden pole in it.
As soon as that incision was made, the cut would be lathered with paste to instantly stop the blood. They would then thrust in a long wooden stake that was the width of a man's arm, which was sharply tapered on one end. They then begin to hit the wooden stake with the mallet, pushing it further and further in. And of course,
bro, look at the face the freaking dude getting impaled is making, bro. I'm dead.
Why are you making that face though?
They then begin to hit the wooden stake with the mallet, pushing it further and further in. And of course, the stake was greased up beforehand to make this process a lot
well, that's nice. Yeah, and that's nice.
smoother. And once the stake has popped out of the criminal's shoulder, head, or mouth, they were pretty much long gone. He is then planted next to a busy road, like a Halloween decoration.
Oh my god! Yo, you fuck. They just show him like that?
To remind everyone that this is what happens when you break the law. They will be left there for the entire day and removed the following morning before the body begins to stink. But wait, there's another version of this as well. You see, on some occasions, the criminals would only be impaled just...
Yeah, I know about the scenario where they'd impale you and then you would hold onto a tree. And they'd let you hold onto the tree branch, right? But then you got slowly weaker. And so then gravity would make your ass slowly slide down.
deep enough to keep them in place, but not too deep that it would immediate death. They would do this by having stakes that had a seated position on them to prevent the person from sliding down any further. They would then be placed on a busy road where they would suffer for hours and hours, pleading to people walking by for help, until eventually succumbing to their wounds. Number 5. Poena culae. Poena culae is Latin for penalty of the sack. And that's exactly what it was. Just a lot more.
Bro, we're only at number 5. Yo, I'm getting queasy, bro.
This was an exclusive punishment for anyone that would murder their own family members. This was first seen in the 2nd century in Rome, but would later be used by the Germans in the 18th century. This all begins with a convicted murderer being placed inside a thick leather bag. But just to make sure the man isn't lonely, they would then add a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. I don't know what these animals did to deserve this, but hey, at least the evil
Yeah,
family
fucked they're dying.
murder doesn't die alone. Once all the animals are added inside the bag, it is then sewn shut, creating an almost airtight seal. Now you would think this would be horrible enough, but no, this is just the beginning. Because as soon as the bag is sewn shut, it is then tossed into the ocean. But don't worry, later on, these murderers would be given the option to either be placed inside the leather bag or be sent to perform at the Colosseum, where they can perform the act of being mauled to death in front of all of their loved ones and peers. You know, at least they had the option. Number 4, rats.
Dude,
This is one of the
both of them are equally as bad. I would probably rather get mauled by a bear than put in a bag and thrown in the ocean.
Facts.
I feel like it'd be a quicker death. Getting killed by a bear would be pretty fast. I feel like 3 swipes and I'm dead.
Number 4, rats. This is one of the most sick punishments in all of human history, and it involves the use of rats. I will cover 2 of them here as they are very similar. The first use of this form of punishment dates back to 1568 during the 80 Years' War. A Dutch leader named Diederik Sonoy would often use this method of punishment, which involved placing a rat inside of a clay bowl, then placing it topside down on a prisoner's stomach, chest,
it up.
face, or groin. Then the back of the bowl would be heated with either a torch or some coals, causing the rat to go into a full-on panic, trying to escape from the heat. And its only way out was to burrow into the human. Once inside, it would continue to chew and tear apart whatever was in its way, desperately searching for a way out. Eventually, the rat finds its way out of the maze and survives. The same could not be said for the prisoner. But the second method was much, much worse, and was highly secretive since it was used
Oh. Dude.
Ain't no harm in wandering. There's a bounty of fresh produce delivered daily for the...
Dude. It's crazy that our ancestors dealt with this. Like, one of
Right.
our ancestors might have died that way.
Right.
Honestly.
under the guidance of the dictator Augusto Pinochet, where he held power from 1976 through 1983. They called it the rectoscope, and I'm sure you
They
have
shove a rat up their ass.
already figured out where this is going.
yep.
Yes, it's exactly what you think. They would place a tube on a prisoner's back door, then insert a rat inside of the tube. The rat would then begin to burrow its way in. These people were so sick that they actually
Yo, these niggas were homo, bro. Like the placing the rat on the chest or whatever and lighting the fire on the back. Like, okay, but what is up with the booty hole play? Like, these niggas were homo.
expected the prisoners to answer questions while this was going on. Eventually, the rat would find its way in and begin to move forward to find its way out. Nobody really knows how many people died from this punishment, but we do know that a ton of people went missing when this dictator was in charge. Number 3, gibbeting. The last known use was in the early 1900s in Afghanistan.
What is
This
it?
all came to light in 1921 when
Dude, early 1900s, though? Like, that's not that long ago. Like, yeah, most people that were born in the early 1900s are now dead. But, like, some of your grandparents might be... If you're, like, 100 years old, you're alive when this happened.
the National Geographic published this image in their magazine. This was also used in the United States from time to time during the 17th and 18th century. One notable example was in Boston, Massachusetts, where a few pirates were hung at the Boston Harbor, which served as a warning to any sailors that were approaching Boston. Now let's talk about England, since they love this form of punishment so much. In England, this was used on traitors, murderers, pirates, and thieves. But after the year 1752, the Murder Act was passed, which required that all convicted murderers must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort. And over 134 confirmed people met this fate. The most common form of gibbeting were actually cages, and they looked like this. It was an all-steel cage that was shaped tightly to the form of a human body, which was so tight that it would not allow the person inside to move. They were then hung 30 feet or more off the floor, usually on a public road or water hole, to ensure that the most amount of people could witness this monstrosity. But
And then did they just leave them there?
only assume this was more annoying than anything, since every time you get thirsty and needed to fill up your container of water, you would have to deal with the dying man begging you for a sip.
Over here!
But the annoyance and torture of the public didn't stop there, because after the criminals would die in the cages, the body would be left inside to rot for years and years on end, with the locals complaining that the smell of death was so pungent that they couldn't even sleep at night. There's even been reports that some human remains stayed inside of these cages for over 20 years, before a government
Dude, it
official
would just
would
be a skeleton. It would literally, you would think it would be a Halloween decoration at that point.
finally remember to clean it out. Number 2, scaphism. This was a form of punishment that was used by the ancient Persian Empire on anyone that would be convicted of murder. First, the criminal would be placed inside of a boat on their backs and tied down. The boat had 4 holes cut out so that the person's arms and legs would be outside of the boat and in the water. They were then force-fed large quantities of honey and milk until their stomachs were visibly full. They would then proceed to lather their entire body with the milk and honey as well. After all these steps were completed, he was then pushed out to the middle of the lake where he was completely exposed to the heat of the sun. But the sun would soon become the least of his worries. You see, the reason they fed him milk and honey was not because it was a great last meal, but because this combination causes the person to get extreme diarrhea, which mixed with the sweet honey attracts rodents, bugs, wasps, bees,
Dude,
And-
that's what's worse. It's because the slowest deaths are the worst ones.
Yeah.
Because this guy could be out here for fucking 2 days.
whatever other animals live near the lake. After being tormented by the animals throughout the entire night, you would think that the daytime maybe gets a little better. No, because as soon as the sun rises the following day, the person inside of the boat gets another gigantic meal
Oh my
of
god,
milk
they bring him back.
and honey and an additional lathering. This would be done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible. It was also well documented that the rodents would continuously attempt to burrow inside of the person through their back door. They were probably trying to get a head start on their next meal. A writer named John Sonaris wrote in great
Nah, I got that butt clench, though. That rat ain't getting in.
Oh god.
That rat ain't getting in. I'm fucking...
incidents. He would go on to say that it was one of the most horrid and cruel forms
It'll
of
nibble, though. I'll start ripping ass on his face.
punishment since it was terribly long and seemed to have no end in sight. He wrote about a man who survived for an entire
ass.
17 days before he finally died from his wounds.
Somebody said butt clench on Hall of Fame.
Apparently, the man spent his last few days with his entire face completely covered with wasps
That's
and his
so
flesh
fucking nuts.
rotting away, filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own filth. Number 1, the oubliette. Oubliette simply
I've never heard of this. What is the oubliette?
means to forget in French. This was a punishment that was used in many places throughout history, including in the London Tower, which had a small and confined room called Little Ease. Not only was this room pitch black, it was also so small that prisoners could not sit, stand, or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in the
No, dude, the CIA does that today.
Yeah,
The CIA does that today to fucking people they want to torture.
sounds good.
They put you in an uncomfortable room and then they'll play Easy
Sound like
Street.
solitary confinement.
Yeah, when we're on Easy Street. And it feels so sweet.
on end. One of the most famous oubliettes is not the one in the London Tower, but in the neighboring district of Warwick.
I like that song, though. You wouldn't like that song if you were stuck in a box for fucking 3 days where you couldn't move.
Warwick Castle.
Why is
Here,
this
deep
number one,
underground
though?
in the castle's dungeons is a very small and narrow cell, completely made of stone, which has a metal door to close it shut. Prisoners were tossed inside of the cell and forgotten about, as the name implies. The prisoner would just have to sit there and wait for their inevitable death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation. Now, of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most
That ain't as bad. I'd rather die that way than die from that.
starvation. Now, of course, death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation. Now, of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most
That ain't as bad. That's worse. Bee and honey thing is like you're dying in around the same amount of
And the snakes and the elephant is all worse. And being stretched, pause, is worse than this.
time, but it's more uncomfortable.
Most of the time, there would already be a rotting corpse
Okay, now that makes it okay. Okay, never mind. All right, now that makes it worse.
inside of the cell to keep the new prisoner company. The previous occupier of the cell would serve as a daily reminder of his upcoming fate. But that's not the only companions that he will have, since the underground dungeons are completely infested with rats that have developed a taste for human flesh.
Oh.
But wait,
Oh my god.
there's more. These oubliettes existed in many of the castles throughout Europe, and in recent times, they have actually discovered these dungeons with dozens, if not hundreds, of human remains inside of it, as
Yo, I'd start smacking my head against the wall. I'd try and make myself bleed out.
proof that they were hardly ever cleaned. Like in Leap Castle of Ireland, where in 1900, during the castle's renovation, a worker found a small opening behind a wall inside of the chapel. This hole had an 8-foot drop that led to a large oubliette, and what the worker found inside shocked him,
Oh, it's probably like fucking yeah.
since it was filled with so
Oh my god. And dude, they would just throw more and more people down there, and you would see people that are newly rotting. You would see skeletons. Oh, that would be terrifying. Because you're just going to sit there for 3 days knowing that you're going to end up being one of them.
many skeletons that they needed multiple cart
I got plot armor. I'm finding my way out.
loads to clear it all out. But just when you think this section is over, it just keeps on giving. You see, there's been many stories of men who have been placed inside one of these dungeons and kept alive for years and years on end, surviving off crumbs of food and minimal amounts of water, prolonging their inevitable demise for as long as humanly possible. These cells were sometimes even placed on ground level so they can hear the voices and laughter of the people outside, an experience that they will never get again in this lifetime.
I mean, would y'all try and stay alive in that scenario? If you're sentenced to being put in an oubliette and you know they're gonna leave
I'm not gonna lie, the oubliette, it sound bad just because of them keeping the bodies there, but I still rather do that than the motherfucking steak through my booty hole or than the rat through my booty hole. I'd rather do that than the milk and honey. Shoot, comment down below which one do y'all think was the worst? Which one do y'all think is the worst, and which one would y'all prefer if you had to do it? But that's it for this reaction, y'all. This is kind of crazy.